my body. Every size, every line, every girl, every guy, everybody who don't identify.
A lot of you will already know of the world of Silent Hill, whether it is through the decades-old video game series or the two films that came out under the franchise in 2006 and 2012. The playable teaser of the PlayStation game Silent Hills, otherwise known as PT, is widely accepted as one of the scariest horror games of all time. Silent Hill aims to strike at the things that frighten us the most: abuse, addiction, the idea that the darkness and monsters in this world are the human beings who have been corrupted. These are all things that we can find scary and fundamentally at their core pretty realistic. But when it comes to the town of Silent Hill, West Virginia, where most of the movies take place, there is a story about the very real town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, which Silent Hill was based off of, that is scarier than any monster or any gore they could put into their films. Hello my loves, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you are new here, hi, hello, my name is Loey, and today I am finally talking about Centralia. This ghost town and the history behind it and how it made its way into becoming the real life inspiration for something as twisted and dark and terrifying as Silent Hill has been on my list of video topics for quite some time now, and I am so excited to finally sit down and chat about it with you guys. I have done so much research on this place, and it's shocking to me that it's not more well known, the story of what happened here. I mean, I knew of it kind of, but when you really get into like what happened in this town that is still burning from the ground up 50 years after the incident that caused it to become a ghost town, it's insane. Centralia, Pennsylvania was abandoned more than 50 years ago when the town of, at the time, over 1,000 people was struck by a freak accident. In 1962, one of the mines that ran underneath Centralia was set on fire, and the city is still burning to this day. The crazy thing is that back in the 1800s, Centralia was actually like a prospering mining town, and that was what it was basically known for. It had a very dense deposit of coal that ran under the entire town, which of course was very prosperous at the time, but wound up being its biggest downfall when in 1962, firefighters set out to burn the town's trash. Now, before you think this is like crazy, apparently this was a very normal way of dealing with the garbage in Centralia, at least at this time. This was back in the 60s. It still seems so weird to me now. I feel like we don't really, as like towns and communities, burn our trash anymore, but at the time, the trash was set on fire, and this was a pretty routine thing, except for the fact that this one time, they were not careful enough putting out the flames, and unfortunately spread to an unsealed mine shaft where it caught on to one of these crazy deep running deposits of charcoal inside of these mines. And from there, the rest was history. The entire town was pretty much on fire due to these long-running mine shafts throughout the entire underground. That fire spread to an unsealed mine shaft, and unfortunately, the minute that it caught on to that deep running charcoal deposit, which was the town's saving grace when it was a famous mining town, once the flames caught on to that charcoal deposit, the rest was history, and it just kept spreading. Surprisingly, not a lot of action was taken at first, and really the only first documented thing that I could find happening didn't even happen until like 1979. So people were either ignoring it or thought eventually it would just burn itself out. Either way, pretty quickly the mine shafts themselves were shut down due to the unsafe levels of carbon monoxide in them. But like I said, the first warning sign that things were much more sinister than the town had realized before was when a gas station owner, and actually at the time the mayor of the town, stuck a tool into the earth to help him determine like the fuel levels in his little tanks that were underground. And when he checked the levels, he also realized that the temperature of the ground was like 172 degrees Fahrenheit. And he was kind of like, That's a little suspect. The city was just growing hotter and hotter, and some places in it even reaching heights of 900 degrees Fahrenheit in the earth. Crazy sinkholes were appearing all over the place, and you could just see smoke like billowing out of them. What was basically happening is that these mine shafts that were on fire, the fire was spreading through them and spreading up and spreading down and spreading everywhere. And so the earth was just eating away at itself from literally like underneath the ground up. So these sinkholes were super, super dangerous because God forbid something happens and you fall into one, literally you're falling into the earth where fire has been eating away at it. So these sinkholes would go so far down, and at the bottom, it's not just like, oh, you fall, maybe someone will come get you. It's on fire. Like, they were literally death sentences just waiting to happen. Even the basements of people's homes were beginning to fill with toxic gases. People were getting sick all the time, and homes were beginning to deform and tilt due to the structures of them literally being eaten away. I mean, you have to think that the ground is changing underneath it. Like I said, fire is eating away at the earth on which these homes and these buildings stand. One of the saddest and I think like most sinister things that I read about these is that they realized over time that the graveyards of Centralia were literally falling into the earth. So you would walk through, your graveyard, the graves would be there, everything would seem like it was still standing. But since the fires were coming higher and higher and eating away at more and more, the bodies that had been buried were just falling straight into that mess. And it's so sad to think about, but even more so dangerous for the living, because they're walking through, these graveyards are just through their like walking path or going to school, whatever they're doing, driving their cars. You never know when the earth is just gonna like give way underneath you, because again, the surface level of the earth would just look normal, if a bit deformed, but mostly normal. And you never knew when it was just going to give out under you. The real turning point of people realizing just how serious these sinkholes were was when a 12-year-old little boy fell into one while playing in his backyard. And thank the Lord, his cousin was there and was able to like pull him out. And now that little boy is all grown up. His name is Todd, and I think the last name is pronounced Domboski. And now he's actually written like a best-selling novel about his experience falling into the sinkhole and honestly almost meeting his end. Thankfully, this was the turning point of people's mentality about the fact that their town was burning from the inside out. In an interview that was done with two former residents, I should say, of Centralia, one of them was quoted saying, "The incident that told everyone maybe we should move was when a young kid down the street, Todd, had a sinkhole collapse around him and he was sucked down. His mother was watching him, turned around, and when she looked back, he had gone into the pit. This pit went 100 feet down and looked like a cone if you looked down. He would have died if his arms weren't stretched out. When they pulled him out, a huge plume of smoke came out, and you could just see fire at the bottom of the hole." The wildlife in this area and people's pets were unfortunately succumbing to these sinkholes, and now with human children starting to find them as well, people thought it was probably time to head out. I mean, even the highway into Centralia had split in half. Like the asphalt had just split down the middle from the fires eating away at it. So people left, afraid of what would happen if they stayed. So the town's population began to drop, and actually from over 1,000 people to only 63 by the 1990s. Eventually, every building in the town would be condemned by the state, and its zip code would be discontinued, meaning it wasn't actually a town anymore. Only 6 homes still stood in Centralia by 2010, and this is something I find so fascinating, is that despite the fact that the government was buying out people's homes, in fact, there was like a $43 million package that had been pretty much put into the relocation of people from Centralia. So the government was buying their homes, making sure they had a safe place to move, yada, yada, yada. There was a very small group of people that pretty much refused to leave. Despite being court ordered to leave, 10 people remained in Centralia, and in 2013, finally the government reluctantly allowed them to do so, but only under the stipulation that once they passed away, their homes were public domain and they could not sell them and no one else could move in, because pretty much the rest of Centralia at this point had been bulldozed over. All of the houses had been ripped down, the plots had been planted over. I mean, it was like they were trying to erase the fact that the town was ever there. So of the 7 people that are still alive and living in Centralia, they cannot have their mail delivered to the town as it no longer has an actual zip code. They have to have their mail delivered to like family or friends or have a PO box or something. Obviously, no one really comes in or out of the town aside from tourists who are looking to, more times than not, just be kind of spooked by it. Unfortunately, the tourists often leave behind a lot of evidence that they were there, including graffiti art, among other things, which is really sad because the more I was reading on Centralia, the more that I realized that actually there was a huge interest in it by Hollywood. Even potential for filming there, which is wild to think about. Due to all of this graffiti and due to people ruining this place, what is left of it anyway, it's pretty much unusable. And before anybody is like asking themselves, why didn't they just put out the fire? Like, why did they let it keep burning and keep burning and keep burning? Actually, $7 million was put into trying to put this fire out, but it didn't even slow it. So it wasn't until the government was quoted finally, like a final price of what it would look like to maybe put that fire out, and it was $500 million that they realized it was time to just evacuate the town. So what does this have to do with Silent Hill, you might be wondering? And actually, this only really has to do with the Silent Hill films. Silent Hill in the video games is not the same as Silent Hill in the movies. They're 2 totally separate towns. So Centralia was actually a huge inspiration for Silent Hill, West Virginia. Much like Centralia, Silent Hill actually was evacuated due to the fires that were spreading throughout the mines beneath the town. And I find that something else that's very, very interesting is that in Silent Hill, there is a single church that is still standing in the town. Despite the fires, despite so much abandonment, there is just this beautiful church. And Centralia actually still has their church as well. However, they are used for very different things. In Silent Hill, the church is a very evil place where a lot of bad stuff happens, and actually in Centralia, the church is still thriving to this day, at least from what I can find. It was up until like 2015, but I haven't seen anything change since then. Even the people that moved away would still come back and attend service there. So I think that that's really cool, and it kind of serves as like a beacon of hope for this place, especially for people who had lived there their whole lives and then were driven out by the fact that the town was just burning from the bottom up. This place is something I have wanted to talk about on my channel for so long, and I know it's a bit of a different video, but I hope you all enjoyed nonetheless. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you guys very much, and I will catch you in my next video.